you stood there and tried to imagine what the city would look like if all the people on the bicycle would sit in a car, and then we would have a completely blocked, jammed city. So we need the cyclists to have fluent traffic in cities. Parking is also very efficient. If all the cyclists would be cars, there would be no space for people to be, to live, to meet each other, to do interesting things. Everything would be parking place. And you can place a bicycle, 8 bicycles on the spot of 1 car. So that's very efficient. And one thing we found that for a city, every car in the city, 1 kilometer for a car in the city will cost the city in euros 32 cents. And all the kilometers made on a bicycle, the city gains 12 cents in health, in environment, and economics. And how can you design cities to be a more bicycle-friendly city? Well, we have the city of Houten in the Netherlands that is designed with a bicycle as a principle, as the main transportation mode. And the cars are pushed aside to the city edges, and you can only enter the city via the ring road and then enter a quarter. And if you want to go to the next quarter, you have to go back to the ring road and follow the road and then enter the city on the other side. That's a new town, totally built on based on the cyclists on the bicycle. But we also have a medieval town, the town of Groningen, and they changed the traffic system in that town overnight, so that cars could not go from the northern part to the southern part through the city center. You also have to follow the ring roads. So you can redesign your cities and make it a bicycle and people-friendly city. And it's the same what I did in Barcelona. Barcelona is a very old city, but it has this grid structure that many of you North American cities also have. And they changed the grids into super blocks, so that cars are not allowed on all the streets in the grid, but only a few. So they combined 9 blocks into a super block. And in between this super block, you have a lot of space for people and cyclists and people to walk around, and less space for cars and to park and to move there with a very high speed. Well, that's the city. And now you have the bicycle and the cyclist. And these cyclists does not exist. We've got a lot of them. I placed 2 pictures here with a father and daughter, with a man with a special bike. But in the Netherlands, we also have 2 different words for cycling. We have cycling and speed cycling. And if you go cycling, it's just with a gentle pace. You go to work without getting sweat all over and have to shower before you can go to a meeting. And we have speed cycling, and that's the sportive that you see at the Olympics, where you can get medals and be world champion. And these are 2 different types of cycling. Well, cycling is in the open air with no suspension, no balance. So you can translate that to infrastructure. What facilities do you need? You need smooth surface, you need direct routes, etc. So I come to the requirements based on the bicycle and the cyclist. So if you want to design for the cyclist and the bicycle, then you need to keep in mind these 5 main requirements: coherence, directness, attractiveness, safety and health, and comfort. I'll go briefly into these 5 because I got not so much time, but you get the slides afterwards so you can read them. Coherent, you need a network, and Maurits will show you what a lack of network connecting routes mean for the cyclist. If you do not connect them, people will not be so eager to use the bicycle in the city. They use it only for one route. And it's very important to have the option to choose for more than one route, because this street I show here on the picture can be very nice at daytime, but it can be a hazard in nighttime. So when it's dark, most of the cyclists like to have another route. Directness. Now, because you're your own engine, you have to cycle with your muscle power and your own energy. It's very important that bicycle facilities, bicycle routes are as direct as possible. No unnecessary detours. And to promote the use of the bicycle, they are preferably faster than cars, that you can cycle with a constant speed, because slowing down and speeding up costs more energy than just cycling with a constant speed and minimum of delays. Attractiveness is a very new requirement. But we did some research last year, and we found that it's very important that for cyclists that you have a positive stimuli for all senses, that it smells good, it feels good, it looks good, you can hear nice things. And to translate that into practice is that a cycle route along a canal or through a park is more attractive than along a motorway or a very busy distributor street. And we also found out that if the infrastructure is okay, not very good, not a type A, but good enough, it's all right, okay, then you should invest in attractiveness that will attract more people on the bicycle than when you try to make a better infrastructure and smoother and more direct and wider and etc. So attractiveness attracts a lot of people.
Haley, nog 2 minuten alsjeblieft.
Oh, I have to speed up then. For health, well, I skip this one then. It's very important to have comfortable facilities, a smooth surface, no speed humps, no potholes, etc. For that, I want to point to you that it's very important to have the details correct. The secret of the success for bicycle facilities really is in the details. I have a few pictures of details, how to deal with bollards to avoid cars using bicycle facilities. The drainage system is very important, that you keep them safe for cyclists. The separation to make protected bike lanes, you can make them very dangerous for cyclists so that they rather not use them. Or roadwork zones, keep in mind that roadwork zones, that you need their special facilities for cyclists there as well. And of course, if you want to attract more people on the bicycle, they need to leave the bike somewhere behind and not in the building, but make sufficient parking space somewhere else. Finally, I've tried to write down some action steps. If you really want to promote the use of the bicycle and attract more people on the bicycle, there are a few suggestions that I will give you. And of course, I have to attract your attention, draw your attention to our design manual. I hope some of you already know it. It's the guideline that all people in the Netherlands use when they design for bicycle facilities. For more information, you can always write me an email, or I'll be at the end of the webinar in one of the breakout rooms. Well, I think I stick to my time this time.
Excellent. Thank you, Haley. And sorry that I'm being so strict on the time. But now I hope we have some time at the end so we can all have some more discussion and Q&A. Now, I will present about, hold on.
Maybe you can start the next presentation, and at the end, people come up with questions in the chat.
Yes, something went wrong with my screen.
Shame to you.
Yeah, sorry about this. There we go. I think you see my presentation.
Yep.
I'll put the timer on. 10 minutes for me as well. So my name is Maurits Lopez Cardozo. I am the founder and design director of Bikeminded Design Consulting. We are a small Rotterdam-based design studio specialized in cycling, mobility, transportation, and innovation. So we are not really typical designers. We design across disciplines. We're kind of generalists in that way, in that sense, from really traffic street design, urban planning and design, to civil engineering. And most of our work is really on the concept level, in the early stages of the process. Some examples of our work. This is a bicycle superhighway, or high quality bike routes, as we call them in the Netherlands. Design of a network map and wayfinding for the region of Eindhoven in the Netherlands. This is a bicycle and pedestrian overpass architectural design that we have worked on. I'm proud to also be involved in some really interesting projects in the West Coast USA. Bikeminded is part of the design team of the Los Angeles River Path, with local partners. I also work with the city of Davis, the student city close to Sacramento that has a long history of cycling. And quickly a mention about a book that I made with the Dutch National Transportation Authority about cycling and the role it has in the national infrastructure. And there's a link. It's to the Dutch version. English version is on its way. I will want to talk to you about an e-bike perspective and on cycling infrastructure. E-bikes used to be kind of specific. Like 20 years ago, you would think assisted bicycles were for senior people, maybe. Now we see a variety of e-bikes being used for commuting, for logistics, school children. So if we consider characterize different cyclist types, from practical cyclists on the left, at least my left, recreational cyclists on the right, including sports cycling, all that. What we see is that actually across all these cyclist types, people are starting to use e-bikes as well. Not everyone is, but a lot of them are. Actually, e-bikes have become the best sold type of bicycle. So 2 out of 5 bikes sold in the Netherlands is an e-bike. And you know, this trend is up to 2018, but that it continues to increase. I think, and that's why is that? Well, it's because it really offers a large potential. These e-bikes, they reduce the effort you need to go cycling, so it becomes more comfortable. More people will find it pleasant and will be able to cycle, and also travel speeds can be higher. So comparing to a regular bike ride, yeah, you can go quite fast actually without sweating. So that's nice in your office clothes when you're commuting. And you have also the fast types. You see the bottom right picture, and that's, you have to wear a helmet in the Netherlands. But those speed pedelecs, we call them, they really go fast, and that really extends the range of where you're able to go in your time. And that has quite an effect on urban planning. So sorry again, Portland. I quickly made this illustrative map for. Oh no, this is wrong map altogether. So, anyways, what I want to point out that if you have good infrastructure, it's really allows you to go a long distance with an e-bike. And I'll talk a bit more about that. Yeah, I'm getting to a brief overview of the bicycle network in the Netherlands. So a cycling network needs to be a complete system for everybody. So where everybody lives to all their destinations. So a complete system. And in the Netherlands, that's kind of built up from what you can say basic cycling network, which is really residential streets or low speed urban streets. And there's no specific cycling infrastructure there, but it's safe to cycle there and get around on a bicycle. So that's what we do. And then we have a whole main cycling network of 37,000 kilometers, which is like 28,000 miles or something of dedicated separated bike paths in the Netherlands, connecting all main destinations through cities to other also regional. And on top of that, we have these fast cycling routes. As Chris also already pointed out in his introduction. And these fast cycling routes, they are really being built at the moment, and that's the latest development to form an alternative for a commute. So on congested corridors, we built these regional connectors to make it attractive for cyclists to go there. So, and what you run into with these routes, you want to offer a seamless ride, and the network is only as good as its weakest links. So if there's interruptions, if there's barriers, you will not reach your destination so quickly. So like highways, rail corridors, rivers, those things, they actually, or cycling unfriendly intersections, they cut up the cycling network, so to say. So my point here is these barrier crossings, the solutions you put in place to deal with these barriers for cyclists and pedestrians, they are really crucial for cycling networks. And you can build cycling networks until the barrier and then continue on the other side, but it won't be effective until you solve these barriers. And then I have in my last like 3 minutes some design and planning considerations for these routes. I think an important one is cycling networks and routes not necessarily have to be parallel to the existing or the corridors for other modes like cars and public transportation. Actually, it can be a really good strategy to have a separate bicycle route. It's less noise, you have less intensity at the intersection, so it's also functionally better for the other modes. This one ties in really good to the presentation about that kind of system thinking and this first last mile and really integrating cycling with a train station in this case. Just park your bike and run up the stairs and off you go. Minimize conflict with other modes. So in the planning, try to make it. If you're able to design these great separated situations, it's really an improvement for all modes. So again, those kind of reducing barriers, you can go over or under. Or you can mix as long as you can manage to get vehicle volumes and speeds low enough, then it's perfectly okay to mix. Also develop these low stress separated bike routes. This is an image of Rotterdam, actually a neighborhood where I live in, and it used to be this canal zone, which was basically parking and kind of a parallel road, parking road. Lots of space for cars. There was a wide sidewalk, but for cyclists, it was, I don't know. This is not even up to old Dutch standards. So they got rid of that parking here and made this nice high quality route. And those I think are really worthwhile investments. So that was my time. My time is about up. So prioritizing crossings. to enable these seamless connections. A Dutch roundabout is a great example of that. If you like, I can talk a bit more about that in the Q&A. And last interesting thing I would like to point out, you probably know this, you might know this structure. It's the Hovenring in Eindhoven, a circular bicycle bridge. And it really has become an icon of cycling infrastructure. But I think it's important to note that this is actually a practical and cost-effective design solution for a car improvement. That's how this whole thing started off. So I'll leave you with that. And once again, don't forget about those barrier crossings. I think they're really important. Thank you, and I'll hand it over to Melissa.
Thanks very much, Maurits. All right. Get my slides up. Perfect. Okay. So a little introduction. My name is Melissa Bruntlett, and I'm the International Communication Specialist at Mobycon, working in our Delft office. But you might be able to tell from my accent that I'm from the other side of the Atlantic originally. I'm from, well, my family moved here in February of 2019. I am from Vancouver, so very familiar with the Pacific Northwest conditions and a lot of the great work that's being done around cycling already in the Pacific Northwest. So happy to be here for this presentation today. My role with Mobycon largely focuses on the promotion and enabling of cycling elsewhere, building these Dutch contexts into local streets, and then also helping to work on projects in terms of anything from communications to also engagement and encouragement. So I'm stepping in today for my colleague Leonard Nout, who is on parental leave right now, waiting a new baby. So I'm happy to be here and hopefully fill his shoes adequately. So a little bit about Moby is here in Delft, focusing on everything to do with sustainable transport, from cycling to walking, public transport, and how the various modes all mix. And about 10 years ago, we opened our first office in North America, followed by another office in Canada, and then followed by an office in the US more recently. So we are working on both sides of the Atlantic to help bring a lot of these design principles and best practice to cities, both here in Europe and also in North America. So for today, we've talked a lot about e-bikes and design principles. And one of the things that we wanted to try to focus on as well is the role that the bicycle is playing in terms of transport for women as well. So what we found here in the Netherlands is that oftentimes for various age groups, specifically for teens and for the elderly, there's actually a reverse gender modal split. So more women are cycling in the teenage realm, and then also as you get into senior ages. But this is normal also for the average woman everywhere. We're frequently making about the same number of trips as men, more trips than men, but doing that in fewer kilometers or miles. And that's because those trips are often shorter to more care trip destinations, like going to take children to school and various extracurricular activities, also going to do the grocery shopping, taking care of other family members, along with the regular commute. And so what I'm going to focus on today is how those network principles and planning for the bicycle in terms of investment can help facilitate not just the long distance trips. So those long distance trips are really important for the commute, but also facilitating the more everyday trips that can be done on both bicycle and e-bike, especially in the topography that you're all living in the Pacific Northwest. And what it really comes down to is priorities and investment. And we can take the money that we have to allocate for transportation and invest in the picture on the left, create more space for cars to move on these vast highways. But as a lot of us already know, the wider we build them, the more cars will come and the more congestion comes. And so what oftentimes we're looking at is reallocating that budget, often just a portion of that budget, to create more of these cycle routes like what you see on the right. And this would be more of the more long distance or fast cycling routes that Maurits was presenting as well. So for a similar investment, we can be getting alternatives for people that can help give more options for transport. And this isn't a new thing, and it's not, I mean, it's been happening for decades here in the Netherlands, but the point of this picture is that this photo is actually from the West Coast of the US. I believe it's from California, but just to point out that these investments have been made before. And so it's really a matter of reprioritizing, which I know is a lot of the work that's already happening in the Washington, Oregon area. And this is an example of that. So I found this photo from Dongo Chang from Seattle of a reinvestment in traffic calming on a street just by creating more curb cuts to create a more calmed environment, but also a very green environment. So it goes to show that what, as Chris was saying, and as Hilly and Maurice have pointed out, these are not new ideas. They're not something that we've got the magic cure for over here in the Netherlands. It can be done and is being done in North America. And a lot of that, when we're talking about designing, comes to looking at the categorization of the functions of our streets. So Hilly talked about the distribution roads and the flow roads. So those are the areas that are largely going to be more focused on commute. So we can have cycle routes along or nearby those areas to get you further distances, but we also need to be looking at the access streets. How do we get from our home to those access roads that get you further distances, get you to the shops, get you to work, and everywhere in between? And so by making that categorization, it helps to understand the function of the space and then how we should be investing in the design of the space. And this relates to the staircase of Monderman that you see here and the traffic psychology, in that there is a certain amount of time or a certain distance that we're willing to travel as human beings at a certain speed before we inherently want to start speeding up. And so the roads need to accommodate for that. So your access roads, where you would have like a 30 km/h, 25 mph sort of speed limit, that can only sustain for a certain amount of time. And what that looks like in the road network is the maximum of 6 minutes to get out of your neighborhood and reach a distribution road where you can go faster. But that's not to say that 6 minutes needs to be fast. It still needs to be comfortable. It can be calmed. It just means that there's a limited amount of time that people are willing to travel before they can move faster. And so we need to keep that in mind when designing our networks. And what that looks like in terms of an actual street, this is a map of Leiden, where my colleague Leonard actually used to live. He's now living in Utrecht. But you can see this car network where you've got your major flow roads that would be in the red there, and then your access into the neighborhoods, the green arrows there are, there's limited spaces where you can get in to help eliminate through traffic on roads where you don't want that through traffic. But on the flip side, when we look at the bike network, it is connected to those flow roads to get people to the important places they want to go, but then also helps them comfortably get into the neighborhoods. So in this scenario, you've got that very thick line in the middle would be more of a cycle route, getting you from one side of the neighborhood to the other quite comfortably, where, as you can see in here, it's not so comfortable for the car. So it creates a much safer environment, much more comfortable and cohesive environment to get people where they want to go on two wheels. And then in the built environment, this is often what that can look like. So an access road will be a little bit narrower. Your parking will be very clearly defined through different treatments. We use this picture because it looks a little more like a North American street with the pavement, but you can see it's much more of a quieter space, so to speak. It is a little bit wider, I think, than perhaps most neighborhood streets are in the Netherlands, a little more representative of more of a North American street, but the idea is that it's defined as a slower space. But then you get right down to these home zones, or almost a Woonnerf for those who are familiar with those in the Pacific Northwest, where it's almost like an extension of the people's living rooms that live on these streets. So it becomes a very traffic calmed environment. Cars must divert or travel in a more serpentine manner that forces them to slow down, and it makes an environment where for example, this young child can cycle quite safely, independently, without worry of cars conflicting with her daily travels. And so this mixture of the flow roads where people need to go, well, people will go faster in cars, with these more access roads or home zone streets where they're forced to slow down and the environment is much more calm, allows for a mix of options for people to get to where they want to go, but still creates these more comfortable neighborhoods. And these work with e-bikes as well, because you can do that relatively calm trip for 6 minutes outside of the neighborhood, connect to your faster route and get where you need to go quite comfortably, and would be quite applicable to many of the even hilly streets and quite graded streets in the Pacific Northwest, where an e-bike will become quite handy in terms of facilitating more trips for not just your commuters, but also for moms with cargo bikes, or what we see here is even teens using e-bikes to get to and from school. And I think we'd all love to see that as a possibility in North America, or more prevalent possibility. Yeah. And then I want to finish on this example. Finish on this example of a street in, I think when I grabbed it, it was from Portland, to show that this is possible even in your context, and it doesn't have to be expensive. So here you see some flex posts, a reallocation of what would have been a turning lane into a bike lane heading in one direction with a contraflow lane on the other side. Some cement planters to slow traffic or stop traffic from turning into that space, and quickly you have a whole different environment. So what we really want to emphasize is it is possible to apply a lot of what you see done in the Netherlands into North American or Pacific Northwest context streets. So really the sky is the limit. And one last slide. So one of the things we launched during the pandemic was the Mobycon Academy, where we share a lot of this knowledge through workshop platforms. So if you're interested, you can check out the website. We host regular weekly webinars with our experts on things like intersection design, traffic calming, winter cycling, all this sort. So more of this idea of sharing our knowledge with audiences elsewhere. And that's me. So thanks very much, everyone. I look forward to questions if you have any. And otherwise, this is where you can find me if you need me.
Thank you, Melissa. So I think we have about 10 minutes left in this breakout session. Feel free to ask your questions. See a question in the chat. Is it a question? Or you can just speak up and ask your question live.
Yeah, I can chime in. I saw a question about emergency vehicles in the chat, and I am curious about that. So I'm not a planner, I'm a landscape architect, so I'm usually more involved in kind of the design side of things. And my experience is always that a fire department really pushes for the widest possible kind of requirement. I'm just curious what that conversation generally looks like in the Netherlands, or my understanding too is that emergency vehicle size is a little smaller there. I don't know if that kind of plays into it, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Haley, would you want to have a go at that answer? And we can fill in if you want.
You're correct. Our fire trucks are a lot smaller than yours are, but we make wide bicycle facilities so that fire trucks can use it, or the ambulances, medical rescue, etc. Our bicycle facilities are not that very narrow, and if we place bollards, then they're always built in such a way that a fire truck can just tear it down. So I think we somehow solved that problem.
I think another thing, Hilly, that's important to note is things like curb cuts. So in North America, often it's much more of a 90-degree angle, whereas here they're either lower or more sloped, which allows for that access for the emergency vehicles in those spaces. And it's funny because this exact question came up last week as well in my breakout. And I mean, one of my advice for North America is to bring those groups to the table and help them understand the design. Because that will be, a lot of times they just don't understand what it is you're trying to do, or they are misinformed as to what changes will be applied to the street when you're putting these traffic calming measures in. Maurice, do you have anything to add on that?
I have a reflection that relates to this. So in the way how we have the hierarchy of the road system and also the bicycle, different bicycle networks, I think in general, everywhere where fire trucks or emergency vehicles would want to go fast, you know, go the distance, go quickly to that neighborhood or that place where they're going to, on those types of roads, we have separated bike routes. So those will be really the connectors or arterials, and there, there's the car traffic will move aside. So they have their sirens and those things. So there's not really the issue. I think it's really maybe it's really local where this occurs. Maybe in some neighborhoods, 1 or 2 houses where you have this situation where so it's not frequently that this occurs.
Cool. Thank you.
And for those circumstances, it's okay. You know, the last like 200 feet you have to go on a relative narrow bicycle path. So the fire department is okay with that.
Yeah.
Different context.
Cool, thank you.
Let's see.
I think there's a good question here, Maurice, about the benefits of bikeways on separated roads compared to commercial destinations. So understanding the context there, a lot of like Portland or Vancouver, for example, have a lot of neighborhood greenways, but they're off of the commercial streets. And I wonder, I'm going to let the Dutch people address this one and see what they can offer.
Okay. Yes. It's a complex topic, I think, but it relates to spatial planning in general to a large extent. So in the Netherlands, at least in Rotterdam, I know there's a policy that they want certain types of shops are just not allowed to be in the like around the city and these kind of commercial zones outside of the city. They want to have them in the city where close to the people. Yeah, I always think of also France, but I've seen the same in the US, where you have all these commercial, like highways and all these mega stores and all that, and it's really built for cars. Yeah, you're stuck with that. Sorry to say that, but so my advice would be to plan a proper bicycle network around the back or something. You know, make it where the speeds are low, not where all the traffic is merging in and out, but kind of try to overlay a bicycle network the best you can, because if you're trying to add bicycles on that corridor that's already complex with vehicles going, lots of vehicles and lots of interactions of weaving in and out, it's going to be a big puzzle to figure it out. So maybe, I think that kind of thought of separating it from the main arterials makes a lot of sense there. Just a quick general.
I think one of the things maybe that's in terms of what the approach here that I've learned over the time as well is that these areas, for example, if you have like a street with a lot of like grocery shopping and whatnot, that isn't part of the city center here where they're mostly car free, there's traffic calming measures that are implemented to allow people to have access to those stores. So I'm thinking of some of the larger streets here in Delft where there's separated facilities on either side while still allowing for car traffic, but keeping them comfortably safe. And that's where the intersection treatment is really important. Because as those major roads meet, you don't want to minimize the conflict essentially. So the protected intersections, protected roundabouts are really important in those areas.
Excellent. So I don't see the time going back. I'm afraid we're about to be sent back to the main session, but let's continue with questions.
You've got 4
4 minutes. Oh,
4
great.
minutes, yeah.
Oh, now I see time remaining again. When you speak, Hilly, I see the time. Excellent. So I see a question. Is there a safety issue with e-bikes traveling much faster than non-e-bikes? I'll have a quick go and maybe Hilly and Lisa can add. Yes, that is actually a very hot topic in the Netherlands because the bike infrastructure we have is being overly used. So it was designed to a certain capacity at some point, but now we see more people cycling. It's on the rise, and we also see more different types of cyclists, including fast e-bikes and even the very fast e-bikes, and also delivery bicycles. And so also in size you see variations, and that all leads to discussions now to how much wider should we build it, or should we have new strategies altogether in city centers, where we're gonna have actually in the Netherlands now there's 30 kilometers an hour zones has become the standard to kind of help with that reallocation of space and mixing of speeds. Stop.
That's a pretty good explanation.
And I just want to add something about the bicycle streets. Bicycle streets are residential streets where the bicycle is the main transport mode, the main user, and cars are considered to be a guest and they have to behave like guests. So cars do not have priority. Cyclists also do not have priority, but it's their street, so they feel more at ease. And then you have enough space to for e-bikes and common bikes and delivery bikes and all together to use them, because then you have the total width of the street.
Mm-hmm. That's a really important point too, Hilly, when it comes to like the neighborhood streets as well, because they're just traffic calmed, but because they're wider, even if they're not a fietsstraat, they're already designed in a way to force people to slow down or give space. But I think what maybe the audience can take from what Moritz said is that think about the width you're building when you're designing your infrastructure. I realize you're not quite at the levels that they're at in terms of cycle congestion here in the Netherlands, but maybe planning ahead for that so you don't have to come back to that 5-10 years down the road when you start to really achieve higher cycling numbers, that you're allowing for more space, at least for now, until you can change it into a complete fietsstraat.
Hey, Melissa, this is Austin in Seattle. I've got a question on that, on width, which is, I live next to the Berg-Gilman, the railroad. So do you guys think there's kind of a different way for different speeds of cycles, even if we create an e-bike versus kind of a regular, or just mixing all together? That's my thought.
That's a good question. It's hard for me to answer. Like, my advocate side wants to say, don't separate, because then you're going to have a bigger fight. But I'd be interested how, like, if there's any, Moritz or Hilly, in the experience you have more recently, has that
10
been
seconds.
brought up?
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Do we have that plan though for separation?
Discussion.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.